Hey everyone, today I want to look at Warframe and its gamepad aiming issues. This will be a follow-up video to the previous one I did. Pretty much immediately after I had made the previous video, they addressed a complaint with the Nintendo Switch version that affected all the other versions as well. And these updates have made aiming a little better, but it still has its own issues, which I'll be covering in this video. So to start, the dead zone for this version is a 15% circular dead zone, and this is an improvement over the 20% square they used previously. Unfortunately, there are still no dead zone options, so you're left for this 15% dead zone, which can be considered large to some players, but at the same time it may be considered too small if your stick is leaning. So that brings me to the first request, and that's for a dead zone slider. Having this would allow players to lower it if they want to have more responsive controls, and raise it if their stick needs it and they're getting unwanted drift. The next thing is, despite moving away from a square dead zone, they're still restricting diagonal movement around the axes. So if your stick moves anywhere in these blue regions, you'll be moving at a perfect cardinal angle, and in this case I'm moving perfectly left. It isn't until I enter this green region where you start to see diagonal movement occur. This is very obvious when looking straight up or down, as you won't see horizontal movement occur until you break into this green region. Personally, I think I don't see a point in restricting diagonal movement at all, so my fix would be to just remove this and allow full diagonal movement to occur. But additionally, an option to control this range could also be requested, because that would allow players who don't like this to remove it on their own, but players who do like it would be able to keep it as is or control how much cardinal guiding they want. The next thing is aim smoothing seems to have been removed from the previous version, so aiming feels a lot snappier and more responsive than it did. So that's a pretty significant improvement. What seems to have replaced it is at the end of this your stick movement, there's a spike in acceleration, and the range of which is slightly weird. It kind of dips in around the diagonals. And this range isn't too noticeable during gameplay. The only real request that I would have is a request for the intensity of this acceleration. So having an option to control how much of this you want to, completely disable it. Moving on, the next thing is the vertical and horizontal sensitivities are different. The vertical sensitivity is lower than the horizontal, and they actually addressed this in the patch notes for the update that added these controls, and they increased the vertical sensitivity but still kept it lower than the horizontal, and that doesn't really fix the issue players were having. So aside from just wanting both axes the same, one of the main issue that occurs when these are different is it makes diagonal movement biased towards the more sensitive angle or more sensitive axis. So if you move at a 45-degree angle, a perfect diagonal, you'd expect to be moving at 45 degrees. But since the horizontal axis is more sensitive, your angle's lower than that. It's much more flat angle, and this makes aiming in general feel a little flatter than you'd expect, where you'd be putting you'd expect a more vertical angle based on your stick movement, but your cursor is moving more shallowly. So just simply separate vertical and sensitivity sliders would fix this. So some players enjoy having lower vertical sensitivity than horizontal, and having separate sliders would allow them to keep that or customize it in any way they want, and players who want them the same could customize them to be the same. Lastly is an option for the acceleration curve. This isn't really an issue, but it would give players a ton of control over their aim. So the acceleration curve, you can see slow, small stick movements to large ones. This increases gradually up until the point where it is the acceleration jump. But having control over this curve, as you can see, quite a bit of the stick is dedicated to very slow speeds, and being able to control the acceleration curve would allow players to customize this to their liking. Some players prefer more linear curves, where they'd want to move, if they move their stick 10% past the dead zone, they'd get about 10% of their total sensitivity out. And having an option would allow players to very granularly control how their acceleration feels. And again, it's not an issue, but it would give players a ton of control and allow players to really personalize their aiming. That about covers everything for the issues. To recap, a dead zone slider, so that players could control how small or how large it is. Maybe a range of 0 to 30% should cover all preferences. For the restricted diagonal regions, either disable it, either get rid of them, or add an option to control the size with a range of completely disabled to what it is currently. Next is this turn acceleration slider with a range of completely disabled to what it is currently, or maybe even further, to if players want to push it beyond that. Separate horizontal and vertical sensitivity sliders. And finally, an acceleration curve slider with a range, maybe a linear to a cubic curve, so just control over the degree of a power function. And that should give players a ton of control. With all these, I mean, 4 options is a lot to ask for, 4 extra sliders, but it would make Warframe's aiming feel quite a bit better than it does currently. So, everyone, thanks for watching, and have a good rest of your day.